Helping Seniors Television, all about improving quality of life for seniors. If you're a senior, know a senior, or plan to be a senior, then this show is for you. It's all about helping you develop your own aging plan so you can age actively and with dignity. Helping Seniors Television from the Helping Seniors Network of information, education, and resources.
I'm Kerry Fink with Helping Seniors of Brevard Television. Welcome to the show today. On behalf of Joe Steckler, our president and founder, Nancy Deerdorf, our operations director, so glad to have you with us today. This is going to be a show that has a lot of good meaning for you. It's called Updating Your Estate Plan. And I want to talk to you about this because even though we said the title, Updating Your Estate Plan, I don't want to make the assumption that you actually have one, because as we keep talking about, so many people are trying to figure out the best way to put that together. And it's one of the reasons why our mission is to educate, inform, and connect people to the resources that make a difference. And I always like to remind people that we live in Florida, so we understand a hurricane plan. Doesn't mean that you want a hurricane to hit you. It just means you want to not have a big problem because you planned ahead. You want to know how you're going to react if something's coming your way. That's kind of the idea behind making an aging plan. And Joe Steckler, our president and founder, has talked about that. We're now in our 12th year of service as a Florida nonprofit, and that's always been kind of Joe's battle cry. Let's get an aging plan together. And so we actually added to that, kind of euphemistically calling it getting your ducks in a row. Like, let's take a minute, let's get your ducks in a row. Don't be afraid of this. It's not nearly as complicated or as terrifying as you think it might be. And you're going to get so much peace of mind and comfort out of getting this stuff pulled together. And as we've been going through that as a theme for our nonprofit, we've come up with a corollary, which we call Don't Try This on Your Own. Because as we've studied all the things that you really want to think about in your aging plan, it's so easy to inadvertently make a mistake that would really trip you up. And I think one of the biggest mistakes is not even having a plan, because that will definitely trip you up if you run into something big. But even having a plan and not having it updated could be that. So on today's program, so excited to introduce our guest. She is with the law office of Amy B. Van Fossen. She is an elder law attorney. Her name is Tyler Runte, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kerry. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure, and I learn so much every time we get a chance to sit down. I want to remind viewers, if you're new to the program, we archive everything on helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. You can go find the TV shows, the radio shows, the columns and articles that some of the excellent attorneys at Amy's office have contributed along the way. You can also find us on YouTube. You can find us Helping Seniors of Brevard on YouTube or on Facebook. And I was thinking about a show that to me was really pretty informational and really kind of shifted some thinking. It was a show that we did together on the topic of trust. And I had always walked through this illusion that trusts were only for super rich, wealthy, famous people and things like that. And you said, Kerry, if they have a bank account or a home, we probably at least need to explore that. And it's those kind of things that help bust some of the myths about aging. And so I want to talk about one of the myths that I think is really out there to kind of jump us down this topic. Most of us, we think we're pretty smart and handy on the internet. We can go search where to get the best vacation or however we're going to do stuff like that. And then we see a commercial on TV that says we can put together our estate planning documents. And so you go, well, if I could book a trip, I can be an attorney part-time too. And yet you guys deal with the aftermath of that so much.
We do. And we see it happening more and more because I think there's more of those websites or services out there. And people think, oh, maybe I can, get a better price if I do it on my own, or I can do it quickly. I just print something off and I have it signed and I'm good to go. But there are so many formalities with signing and executing estate planning documents. And there are certain things that need to be included in those documents, certain language, statutory language. So if that is not in there, it can be a real problem. And we tell people that it always costs more to fix it than it would have had you just started the right way the first time.
And I think to that point, actually, one of the other things that I've learned from talking with you and some of the other attorneys in the office is that tragically, the moment that you find out your paperwork isn't going to do what you thought it was going to do is the moment that there's not an opportunity to do a do-over, right? Because now somebody's in the hospital, there's a serious situation going on. Worse yet, if it's a case of of a will or a trust or something like that, and they've passed away, all that idea of putting this stuff together and any time that was spent on it really didn't do the thing it was purporting to do.
Right. And it's not always just, we need time to gather information. We need the time to have the meeting with the client or the family and to be able to sign the document. So there's a bit of time needed on our side, but also, if you've lost capacity, then there's no time on the client side.
Right.
Once that happens, then you're really, your hands are tied and nothing can be signed.
Yeah, I want to talk about that just for a minute because I'm always really kind of cautionary about this thing that as a person that's dealing with aging, maybe you're dealing with this for the first time, maybe, you're talking about for a loved one, maybe you're an adult child with a parent that's, you're starting to see some things that are maybe a little disconcerting and you're just trying to figure out how to manage it. We always use these terms, and I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. When we talk about somebody having capacity or not having capacity, that's a pretty serious line of demarcation and all this legal stuff, isn't it? But if you were going to just explain to a family that I'm not really familiar with the term, how would you just explain it in kind of layperson's terms so that we understand, I think understanding why it's important to get these documents while you have capacity is so much preferable to trying to scramble, when that person is lost.
Absolutely right. Planning is key. Planning is absolutely key. But when it comes to incapacity, when someone is going through the aging process or, even with Alzheimer's or dementia, they're going to get evaluated by a doctor. And oftentimes those evaluations start with maybe a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment, or they're better at certain times during the day. That happens very often. But once a doctor has deemed someone incapacitated and said, there's a report, it's called a letter of incapacity, which says this person can no longer make decisions for themselves, that's when, from a legal standpoint, we can't have them sign documents because they can't make decisions for themselves. So what they may be signing is absolutely nothing that they would want if, when they had capacity.
Right. So when you're talking about updating an estate plan, so the first thing we have to talk about is, do we have an estate plan? And if you're going to break it down for a person who's just kind of like a real novice and maybe they're even afraid, sometimes we're intimidated. We don't want to ask the questions because we don't want to feel like we're that new to this whole topic. In fact, I remember, we've all been in class where the teacher said, you might as well go ahead and ask the question because somebody in class has got the same question. And, just go ahead and ask the question. It's going to help us all get ahead. But if somebody is saying like, what do you consider an estate plan? Like you mentioned, somebody will come in and they think, I brought in this one document I need help with. You're like, wait a minute, that's true, but we have a few other things we got to consider too.
Right, and that's oftentimes how it starts. Someone will go to a bank or and say, I need the bank will tell them, you don't have a power of attorney. So they'll come into our office and say, okay, I need a power of attorney now. The bank told me so. And then that opens the door to, all of the other documents that are available that they probably need as well. Same thing, if you're in a hospital and the doctor says you need a healthcare surrogate or this person needs a healthcare surrogate, they come in and say, okay, I need a healthcare surrogate, or a loved one of that person calls us and says, my family member needs a healthcare surrogate. Well, then we have the whole conversation. Do they also have a power of attorney? Do they have a will or a trust? So there's lots of different documents and they all play an important role in the whole scheme of things. But education is key, and just learning what documents are available and what documents should be considered and what documents would be helpful for, each individual.
Well, let me walk us through the online story first, because I think there's a great, we all love to be do-it-yourselfers because we think, A, we're saving money, and B, we think we're smart enough to navigate the internet and figure out the stuff we need to do. And then C, maybe mistakenly we go, well, how complicated can this actually be? I just have to click a box here and click a box here and sign this page and I'm good to go, because that's what the TV commercials say. And it was so funny. We were talking before the camera was rolling. You said, I pulled out a couple of the fine print things. And even when you go to those legal sites, they're telling you this is not basically substitute for legal advice. So if it's right there on the website and you come in with these documents, one thing if you get them all right, well, boy, if you get them wrong, then you could really be in deep trouble. And yet it seems like that becomes a false sense of security. So how often do people come in to your office with, like, I'll call it like a homegrown document. You know, maybe they got it from an office supply store, maybe a friend at church or something said, oh, I know how to do these, I'll help you get that. And then they bring it into you, and you have the sad duty of saying, this isn't really going to do what you hoped it would do.
It does happen often. I mean, it is often. And some people come in with so much confidence in those documents, and others come in with the, they take it as, I know these are not what I need. So can you help
me?
Right, help me. So there's two in the, and then there's the ones that believe in them and don't want to hear that they're not, they may not be good enough. But then there's the ones that just say, we were going on a trip and we were leaving the next day at 6 a.m. So I printed this off as just kind of a last-ditch effort. And I know they're, not what they need to be, so please help me.
Okay. So in those cases, even if you did that, it probably makes sense to sit down with you or an attorney at your office and say, okay, I did this mea culpa. Can you help me make sure this is right? Right,
absolutely. And then we go through, there's some common reasons why they might not be right, as far as signing, most of the documents need to be witnessed and notarized.
Right.
If those pieces are missing, it's a clear, this is not going to work for you.
Right.
And then some of them are more in the details. We also find that what questions you are asked online may not be the right questions that should be being asked. So they think they're, let's say, distributing their assets to their children equally, but not only is it not explained maybe correctly on the website, but they don't understand what the terminology is.
Yeah.
So we read them and we're like, oh no, it's not going equally to all three kids. It's actually going to, your brother, whoever, because they've named them maybe as their personal representative and they just don't understand the language.
Yeah. Sometimes like you go through one of these questionnaires. Yeah, I guess sometimes you'll go on a travel and they send you a questionnaire afterwards and they're asking you and you got to check one of the boxes, but none of the boxes do exactly what you were thinking your experience was on that particular question. I imagine that probably happens sometimes on these legal forms too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk about another dynamic that comes into play, because again, our topic is we're talking with elder law attorney Tyler Runte of the law office of Amy B. Van Fossen. And the question that we're talking about is updating your estate plan. So that makes an assumption that we have something to begin with, which is why we spent a little bit of time talking about maybe something came in online. Let's take a different direction. Somebody has just moved to Florida. Florida is exploding in terms of the number of people who are moving here. I would historically say from the North and from the Midwest, but now I'm hearing even people from the West Coast are making their way to Florida. And I don't mean West Coast to Florida. I mean West Coast. They're coming to Florida. All these people may or may not have had an estate plan done, and maybe by a very qualified elder law attorney in their own location. But now they've landed here in Florida on the beach, and they're trying to figure this all out. They shouldn't just assume that what they have is going to do what they hoped, right? Right.
So we will take their estate plan and we'll review it, and we'll see what pieces we can use and what needs to be updated. Oftentimes, they need, even if they have a trust, let's say they've already created a trust and they probably spent a decent amount of money doing an effort and time. So we certainly still use that. We just update it to comply with Florida law. So one of the specific things that we often have to update is for the homestead tax exemption, the statutory language for that. So we will include that, but we use their existing trust. Okay. We just amend what they have. Other documents, such as the power of attorney and the healthcare surrogate, oftentimes those need to be completely updated or redone, I should say, because Florida law is very picky on those documents. So we typically redo those.
And that's another part of it, right? Is that you come here, and there's another dynamic, right? Because you have snowbirds who say, well, I'm just going to pick on Michigan for a second. I'm up in Michigan, during the summer months, but then I come down here for the winters. And that probably is another dynamic that you have to have people sort out with their estate plans too.
Right. It kind of depends on your residence, where you spend more of your time, but it is one of the factors. And we, even for people that live in Florida and move outside of Florida, even though we're not seeing it all that much, most people are coming. But if you're going, we always recommend having your estate plan reviewed by an attorney in the state you are moving to, just to make sure that, the laws of that state are in there.
Okay. Let's take another example as we're talking about, updating your estate plan. Let's suppose that maybe 10, 15 years ago, you paid good money and you thought you got all of your documents together and it's all just the way you had hoped it would be, and you put them in a drawer, and by now there's a little bit of a dust layer on it, and you haven't really pulled them out in a while, that's another sign that you ought to probably pull them out and let somebody take a look at it and make sure that it's updated the way you want, right?
Right. We recommend usually updating, or at least taking them out and looking at them every couple of years, just to make sure that everything in there is still how you want it to be. Oftentimes, there might be a marriage or a divorce in the family or new children.
Right.
And so you just want to make sure all of that is included in there. If you're looking at them every few years, you're doing a good job.
Because it's kind of complicated, right? If there's been a family change of some type, maybe whatever the case is, and now maybe the person that you had named to be a certain player in your documents, maybe they're no longer available to do that, or maybe something's happened. There's been something went on in the family. And, that must be a horrific experience. Like you pull out the documents that I had all this ready to go. I can't believe this is still in here,
We have that so often.
Yeah.
And it's for a variety of reasons. Maybe a child that you had as your successor trustee took a new job and it just takes all of their time. If something happened to you tomorrow, they would have no time to administer your estate or your trust. It could be that the person that you named has now lost capacity. Oftentimes, people will name a sibling when they're in their younger years. And then once they age, their children have also aged. So then it would make sense to make the children their successor trustees or their agent on their power of attorney. So, and those things can kind of be forgotten just because life goes by.
Right.
And then you pull it out and you're like, oh, well, my kids were 5 when I did this, and now they're 30 or, even 20. And now I should probably have them listed instead of my, brother that may not have capacity, or life just happens. And we're not always thinking, do I need to be updating my estate plan because of this?
This is the weirdest analogy in the world, but I was thinking like not recently, not so long ago, was going through our pantry, and I go through the pantry and I go, this expired 2 years ago. And I was actually like shocked to see that something had been sitting in a pantry for if it expired 2 years ago, it's been probably in there for, 3 or 4 years. And yet it's kind of a reminder that time keeps on moving. And so even though you might have done this, I did that in 2010, but here we are, 12 years later, 15 years later, by the time somebody sees this program, and it's time to pull that out and make sure that it's going to do the thing that you purposed it to do when you first put it together.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just think that, I think when you get it completed, you also kind of do that mental check, the box. I've completed my estate plan. So it kind of falls to the back of the brain.
Right.
And then years can go by. You've done what you were supposed to do. So you're not really thinking about it. But then life happens and they might need to be changed.
So as we've been talking about this, if somebody sitting there going like, okay, yeah, I should probably do an estate plan update. What does that mean? What do you recommend? Like if somebody's watching and said, yeah, you guys have talked me into it. I haven't had anybody look at this in a while. And I want to be sure it's right. What does that mean?
Yeah. So at our office, you would just call our office and you would just, whoever answers the phone, you tell them I have an estate plan. And I just want to make, updates to it, or maybe I don't want to make updates, but I need someone to review it.
Right.
I'm in that stage. I just need it reviewed. And if you don't even know those questions asked, we will get it from you. But then we just set a time to sit down and review it, flip through it, look through it, make sure that what you thought you knew when you signed it is still, what you still know. And everything in there is how you want it to be.
Yeah, because I've done enough TV programs and radio shows, both with you and some of your colleagues, to understand that really the dynamics of knowing what these documents are going to do is going to be so important, and it's so important to peace of mind. Because I guess the worst thing you would find yourself is with a fake peace of mind, because when something transpired, now you find like, wow, I thought this was all covered, but boy, this is really a mess now. And it doesn't take that long. It's not that expensive to just do that review, right?
No, not at all. And it's, again, you go back to, if you don't do it, the problems are just, could be huge. the consequences could be huge. So it's better to get it done. And it's really not that scary. Even if you don't have an estate plan, or even if it's you reviewing it, we try to make it as painless as possible. And we just sit down together and talk about it.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of talking to a number of people that you actually help them and their families with their estate plan. And I kind of hear universally, like, they're really happy because they said, I went home with this binder. Everything is in here. I know what I need to do. I feel really a good peace of mind about that. And I feel good about that, not only for me, but for my family. But a question I wanted to ask you related to an update. Let's say you came to the law office of Amy Van Fossen and you actually helped us put together an estate plan. How often do you tell us we should come back in and let us just make sure everything is, check under the hood, make sure it's all going the right way?
Yeah, I mean, we say every couple of years. Take it out, look at it every couple of years. We do have people that will call and say, an address changed or this. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need a full update or anything like that. And people move all the time. So that would just kind of be nonsensical to think we're going to update it every single time a phone number changes or an address changes, because you would be doing it all day, every day. But as long as you're looking at it every couple of years, I think that's great.
Good. So, and another thing, because we've talked about this, there's programs that we've done together about trusts and things like that. And you've talked a lot about being careful to, like, for example, I'm just using this as one example about things that you want to check when you're going through your plan. You said, people will go to a lot of effort to put together a trust so that it's going to do the thing that they purposed it to do as far as probate goes. But if they never took the steps of getting the property put into the trust or do those follow-up steps, then it's still not going to do what they want to do. And that's something that you guys would probably help them uncover if you're working through the paperwork, right?
Right. Absolutely. So we go through that. We call it trust funding. So if you created a trust, that's kind of step one. And then step two is making sure that all of your assets are titled in the name of the trust. And we do have clients that call and say, maybe it's a year after they sign their trust, and they'll say, we got the trust signed and that's all we did. And now we need to do that next step. We remember you told us to do, the funding, but we got caught up and we never did it. So now this is us calling and saying we need help through that. And to those people, kudos to you. You're getting it done. Even though it was, a year later, it's still happening. So trust funding is so important because, like you said, if you have a trust but your assets aren't titled correctly, the trust is, not going to be helpful for you.
Yeah, and then I guess another dynamic that I've heard you guys talk about enough that it must happen with some regularity is somebody comes in and they bring you documents to have you take a look through and see if it's okay. And maybe it was because they had this really great real estate attorney. I'm just picking on that for a second. And the guy said, yeah, I can write up your estate plan too. So he hands them an estate plan and they think they're all good. And then they bring it in and you're like, well.
Yeah. I think in our line of work, we do a lot of deed work. So transferring properties into trust and real estate attorneys do that, staying on the real estate attorney topic. And that's okay. I mean, that's perfectly okay. We just like to review it just to make sure our file is updated. It's done. Not saying that they would do it incorrectly, but just to, cross your T's, dot your I's, make sure it's done correctly. And yeah, there is some interface with different attorney, types of law, with ours.
Yeah, well, and what I mean is that this is why it's so important to get. I use the analogy. It's like if you go to a particular kind of doctor, the doctor wants you to see a specialist. I'm just say it's they want you to see somebody who's a cardiologist. You're not going to go pull a podiatrist and say, well, what do you think? You're going to go to the attorney who specializes in this because again, I've heard Amy Van Fossen with the law office, and she talks about for most families. Dealing with these kind of things is, a one-off or two-off, maybe in your lifetime, and for you guys, you're dealing 20, 30 every week, so you really see why it's so important to get all this stuff the right way.
Yes, it definitely is. I think other attorneys would probably send you away. We don't want to touch that. But yeah, you do need someone who knows what they're doing, especially with the public benefits part of it. I mean, that's such a detailed, kind of intricate type of work that we do. So with that, you absolutely need someone. I mean, with all areas of elder law, you need an elder law attorney. But yeah, it's important that the person knows what they're doing.
Well, and specifically to that event, to that part of it, the public benefits thing, that really has to do with an area that you guys as a law firm, take a lot of care and attention to. We're talking about Medicaid benefits and VA benefits, and helping families make sure that they've structured properly to be able to access those if that becomes necessary at a certain point. And like I said, it's almost like, I almost call it like the equivalent of 3D chess. It's bad enough if you have a 2D chess board and you're trying to figure out your moves, but there's so many things that we wouldn't even think about that have to do with all these possibilities that would move you from layer to layer. And that's why it seems like getting the wisdom of getting of really good help to look through those documents makes sense, to be sure you're on the right course with it. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you and say, okay, I got to do this, how do they get in touch with the office? So
our number is 321-345-5945. And our website is www.amybvanfossen.com. Yep. We're located at 211 East New Haven Avenue. So we just moved recently, enjoying our new office. But to what you just said, I think that with the layers, I am proud of our office in that we do elder law. We do all the different, we do have different departments within our firm. And just like you said, you might come in for estate planning and we uncover, VA benefits would be on the table. Yeah. And we can direct you to the people in our office that handle that. So I think that having an office that does so many types of, different divisions of elder law is very helpful because we can help in so many different areas. Yeah, so important. Well, thank you, Elder Law Attorney Tyler Runte of the Law Office of Amy B. Van Fossen, for joining us today. And we thank you for joining us on this edition of Helping Seniors Television.
I'm Joe Steckler. Thank you for joining our program today. I'd like to remind you that our senior information line is available to you at 321-473-7770. There you can get help and direction that could be helpful for your specific situation or circumstances. The work of helping seniors is very important, but we can't do it alone. That is why our sponsors here in Brevard County are so important. I'd like to thank our many area sponsors, businesses, and medical providers who support the mission of helping seniors that help us carry the cost of our media efforts. If you'd like to join us either as a business partner or simply donate as an individual, we welcome your call at 321-473-7770. You are always welcome to visit our website at www.helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. Thanks so much for your help. It does make a difference.